I hope you got some rest after yesterday's athletes development classes. Today's topic is about coaching philosophy, and that's of particular interest for us because in India we are facing a situation that the coaching is slightly different in comparison to other countries all around the world. And as our president mentioned already yesterday, we have to change the mindset of our athletes. And the only person who is able to do that is actually the coach, him or herself. We're using today's presentation not only to give you an idea how you can build your own coaching philosophy. For us, it's also important that you apply this knowledge on the ground with your athletes. Coaching is always a bit about try and error. We are dealing with human beings, and every human being is adapting to the training in a different way. Right now, we have 348 participants joining this class. And I can assure you, if you give this 348, now 350 participants, a 5-kilometer run, and you ask them to do this in 25 minutes, the load will be different for all 350 participants. And that's exactly what you have to check out with your athlete. How is a specific athlete adapting to a given load? And again, that will be different. If you are coaching a group of 20, 25, maybe 30 athletes in a school, you have to find a way to customize the training so that every athlete has or finds an individual way to adapt. And you know that adaptation always depends on the load as well as the recovery. Meaning we always have to customize load and recovery when we want to have an optimal training effect. But it's not only about the physical aspects of training. It's also about the mental development, as you could see yesterday. By developing, especially the young athletes, the talents, we always need to consider the physical development, the technical or coordinative development, and the mental development. Okay, guys, please stop sharing your own screen. Whoever Uma Gupta is, please stop sharing your screen. Because otherwise we cannot proceed with our presentation. Yeah, that's a bit unfortunate, guys. Please, Uma Gupta, if someone knows him or her, please tell him to stop sharing the screen. Anyways, we're talking about coaching philosophy today, and you've probably seen the schedule of today's classes, or of the classes in general for this week. And this is not only a 1 or 2 time session thing, this is actually a large-scale coaching program. We have approximately 22 sessions, and over these 22 sessions, over the next 5 weeks, we want you to work on your personal coaching philosophy. And every evening or after every session, we want you to write down the key aspects so that you step by step can actually build your own coaching philosophy. Because there is not one philosophy which suits everyone. A philosophy does not only depend on how you're conducting your training, it also depends on the way you are communicating with your athletes. It depends on your environment. It depends on your personal perception, how you want to be seen as a coach. And we just want to encourage you to think about your own coaching philosophy, what you are able to do, how you are able to work with your athletes to progress as a coach. And we've already mentioned that coaching is a lifelong learning process. And as a coach, every single day, you have to start looking for some new information. That might be videos on the internet, it might be scientific articles, it can also be discussions with your colleagues. But you can only expect your athletes to become better if you're improving as a coach yourself. And now I will change to our presentation regarding coaching philosophy. Again, please get a notepad, something to write, so that you can start some of the aspects to work on your own coaching philosophy. Because at the end of this course, we would like you to submit your personal coaching philosophy to us, to AFI, so that we can give you a short feedback and that we can also present some of the, of course, we in an anonymous way, but that we can present some of the suitable philosophies coming from your side. Thank you very much. If you have any question, again, use the chat function. Yeah, Mr. Nagesh and Mr. Rajmohan, after the session, they will present some of the questions. And if you have difficulties in understanding me, if you want some Hindi translation, also mention that, including the specific point which you want to know in Hindi. Yeah, thank you very much. I see you later. So, as already mentioned, coaching is always about education. It must become a habit to increase your knowledge on a daily basis. And education, as said by Nelson Mandela, is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And this also affects the world of coaching. Only if you are able to increase your knowledge, if you're improving your coach's education, you will be able to apply more knowledge to the athlete on the track. Yeah, there's one of the famous American coaches, Lawrence Seagrave. He used to say, "My lab is a track." In coaching, we always have to find a way to apply the knowledge. And you might find a talent in your training group. You're building certain training principles, you're applying certain exercises to this athlete, and it works very well. Unfortunately, this might change within an athlete's career. What happens or what works for athlete A in 2020 might not work any longer in 2021, because a human being is experiencing constant change. And if your athlete is getting stronger, if they're growing up, if they're getting faster, it will also have an impact on the adaptation, on the response of your training. So we constantly have to figure out how are our athletes reacting to certain training loads. It might also be that you have two very talented athletes in your group. When I was a coach back in Germany, I had, for example, two under-18 athletes. They were among the best of Europe. Both were running 10.61, the other one 10.63. One of these athletes was very powerful, very strong, and he had to train 6 times a week, including a few maximum strength sessions, but he was very bad when it comes to plyometrics. He had relatively long ground contact time. In the same training group, there was another athlete. He was extremely fast when it came to ground contact, but he was not as powerful. So it was a completely different kind of athlete, and he was only able to train 4 times a week. If these athletes would have conducted the same training program as the other athletes, I'm pretty sure he had to deal with some injuries. On the other hand, if the athlete with the 6th session would only have been conducting 4 sessions, most likely he would not have been able to make it to that level. So even if you have athletes in your same training group, you have to find individualized way to approach them, to address the training. And that means if you have a large group, you need to write different training programs. You cannot cover your group, especially with the more experienced athletes, only by writing one training program. So we mentioned yesterday already that individualization and customization of training programs becomes crucial if we want to develop international world-class athletes. To do that, to individualize the training, of course, we need to increase our coaching experience. And one way to do that is, of course, by working with the athletes. The other one is talking to other coaches who've probably made this experience previously. And the last point is to increase your coaching knowledge, coaching education. When we're thinking of coaching, there are 3 core values. And I want you to quickly go through these questions and ask yourself, why are you coaching? It might be that it's a calling to teach sport and life skills. That you want to develop commitment, teamwork, courage, discipline, and other aspects with your athletes. You also have to understand how do you want to be seen as a coach, regarding demanding and efficient practices, for example, your competition management, whether you want to stick to tradition, like team dinners, goal settings with your athletes, recognitions for senior athletes or very successful athletes, something like that. And you have to ask yourself, what do you want to coach? Is it only the athlete, or you also want to develop people to compete and to win in sport and life? For example, playing like a champion and to become a good citizen at the same time. And that's a crucial point, especially right now. You might have seen that a lot of our national athletes, for example, they posted videos to encourage the population to stay fit, to stay healthy physically and mentally during the coronavirus. So by developing good athletes, you're not only developing potential medal winners, you're also developing role models for the rest of the country. And these are questions each coach should ask him or herself repetitively. Why do you coach? How do you coach? And what kind of coaching style do you want to apply to your athletes? And based on this, you can describe the core values of your coaching. If you start as a coach, a lot of people are simply applying what they have done as an athlete. And we've already discussed that these methods, which have been used in India in the past, are probably not the most successful. They enable us to be successful maybe at tough games, maybe even at Asian games. But when it comes to the global level, World Championships and Olympic Games, India has not been particularly successful in the past. And our duty, or your duty as the coaches who are applying all this on the ground, is to change that. If you start your coaching career, again, most of you will just start repeating what they've experienced as an athlete. And we have 4 main stages when it comes to the development of competency. In the beginning, the first stage is so-called unconscious incompetency. You are unaware of the skill and your lack of proficiency. You just repeat what you have experienced as an athlete and you're applying it to your athletes. You do not really know whether it works or it does not work. You don't really aware whether it makes sense, whether it's scientifically proven or not. And this is called unconscious incompetency. You are not aware of the things you do not know. The second stage in coach's development is a so-called conscious incompetency. You are aware of the skill, but you are not yet proficient. Maybe you've joined the AFI level 1 or level 2 coaching course and you start to realize that a few of the things you're applying actually don't make sense, or they are not in line with the demands of modern sports science. So you develop a certain understanding that what you're doing is not correct. Still, you're not in a position to judge what is the correct thing. And this becomes, after a while, the third stage, the so-called conscious competency. After attending the level 1 and level 2 courses, after listening to a lot of international lectures, maybe reading some sports science journals, you start to develop a so-called competency and you're able to use your coaching skills, but only with effort. It's quite normal if you, as a young coach, if you start planning your first training program, you want to do it in the correct way. You're reading a lot of articles. You might even talk to some other people. You still have a lot of questions. And that's called conscious competency. Because if you're getting more competent, you will also have to raise more questions. You develop a better understanding of sports science, but you still know that it takes a lot of effort to apply all this knowledge in a weekly training program. And only if you reach the last stage, the so-called unconscious competency, that becomes where you're able to perform the skills automatically. You don't really have to think about it. You gain a lot of experience. You're able to increase your knowledge on a daily basis. And you don't have to think about creating a training program or applying specific exercises any longer, because you're so used to it. And you're not only used to applying them on the ground, on the coaching itself, but you also get used to evaluating scientific journals, for example, videos you find on YouTube. Yeah, so these are the 4 stages when it comes to learning or skill development, from unconscious incompetency in the beginning over conscious incompetency towards conscious competency, and the final stage is the so-called unconscious competency. And that's what we have to aim for. It's quite normal in the beginning that you probably feel a bit overstressed when you start working with your athletes and you start applying specific training programs. Yeah, but after a while, after getting a better knowledge, after applying your ideas and thereby increasing your experience, you will develop a competency, and after a few years of training, it becomes an unconscious competency, which does not mean that you have to stop learning. It's quite the opposite. If you develop this last stage, the unconscious competency, you are in a state where you constantly educate, or update yourself. And I can guarantee you that even coaches like Galina Bukarina, who is talking to you tomorrow, and she's over 70 years old, or Dr. Klaus, who will talk to you in 2 weeks' time, he's also above the age of 70, they still every day for 1-2 hours searching the internet for new training methods, new updates, even in their specific events. Yeah, and that's exactly what we have to do. Coaching is a lifelong learning process, and you have to start this process of educating yourself right now. And we are very glad that so many people of you, I think right now it's 440, have joined today's session, because it's the first step to increase your competency towards the highest stage of skill development. All around the world, but especially in the Asian countries, a lot of coaches are struggling with developing themselves. And it's very interesting to see here in this picture, Bill Bowerman, one of the most famous coaches who's ever lived in the world of track and field, saying that the athlete makes himself and that it's not the coach who makes the athlete. Sometimes in this IAAF development courses, we also say that successful athletes are not necessarily trained by good coaches. At the other hand, a good coach is not necessarily training successful athletes. Yeah, certain talents are successful not because of the training, but despite the training. So as a coach, we should never take too much pride in developing medal winners at national championships, for example, especially not, as you could hear yesterday, in the under 16 or under 18 stage. For us, it's very important that we develop independent athletes, that we encourage our athletes to take responsibility and to share their knowledge, their ideas about coaching. This saying, the athlete makes himself, actually indicates that it should not be a one-sided approach to training. It should not be listening and obeying in training. As coaches, we always have to encourage our athletes to provide feedback, because that's the only way to learn. And as a young coach, especially, you can learn the most if you're dealing with highly talented, highly gifted athletes. If you are always applying what you're reading in the books, what you're reading in the journals, but you're not listening to your athletes, most likely you will have difficulties in developing your athletes to a certain level. Because again, we want to enforce the individualization, customization of training programs in India, but to have this individualized way, you need to, or you are relying on the feedback which is given by your athletes. And this is one of the major differences between Western countries and Asian countries. And personally, I believe it's also one reason why a lot of Asian countries are not yet that successful, because it's a very one-sided, a top-down approach in coaching. What we want to develop is a so-called athlete-centered approach. We want you to encourage your athletes to take responsibility. And we want to see athletes taking ownership, which requires certain guidance of your athletes. Yeah, it's not that the coach is always providing the training program. That might be the case with 15, 16-year-old athletes. But as we mentioned yesterday, we want to develop these athletes in a mental way as well. We want them not only to become successful athletes, but also successful people in life. And that means we have to educate them. We have to nurture them to become independent and to take responsibility. As a coach, throughout your career with one athlete, in the beginning, you might expose the athlete to a lot of different stimuluses. You use a lot of different training methods. But as the athlete is getting older, throughout the athlete's career, the coach usually takes a step back and becomes more a consultant rather than a direct coach. We need to engage the athlete in discussion, and we also have to encourage the athletes. Guys, can you please stop that? And you have to encourage the athletes to think about their training as well. If an athlete does not exactly know what is the purpose of a specific exercise, it will be almost impossible for him or her to achieve a high quality of this exercise. And remember yesterday's session, we want to focus on quality. If you do not understand the task given by the coach, yeah, it's very hard to accomplish this task. So as coaches, we have to legitimate the things we're doing, and we have to share the purpose of specific exercises or training methods with the athletes. Yeah, and we need to, or we are relying on the athlete's feedback. And this culture of providing feedback, this is something we have to establish within our training group. And understand that it's not necessarily in line with the Indian culture in general. In India, we have a very hierarchical system. You have a system where especially young people, they always listen to the older people, the more experienced people. But this is an approach which in sports most likely will not be very successful. I understand it's not that easy, but you probably have to break, at least in a certain way, with this cultural tradition. And you have to, again, encourage the young people to provide feedback. And what's very essential is to ask questions as well, because questioning becomes an important tool in facilitating learning within this athlete-centered approach. Coaches have to help the athletes to learn and to develop self-awareness through posing purposely phrased questions. An example might be very simple, that you ask your athletes, how are you doing this morning? Yeah, so that you get an idea of, are they fully recovered or are they not? Yeah, you also have to ask them questions like, how much do you think an athlete has to sleep to fully recover? So that you engage them in a thought process. You can even ask them, what are the technical difficulties of a specific exercise? What some of our coaches are doing. For example, in the javelin throw, they ask the athletes to paint a picture of the athletes themselves in specific positions. For example, in the power position or during the release phase, so that the athletes actually have to think about, how do I have to look? How is the right technique looking like in a specific position? Yeah, you can either ask them to, again, draw little pictures, you can ask them questions, but you constantly have to engage the players on such a conscious level, and thereby you enhance concentration and the intensity. Because if the athlete gets a better understanding, they will immediately take more ownership, and thereby the intensity of your training, the quality of your training will be increased. So please try to follow this athlete-centered approach. Ensure that your athletes are taking responsibility, and as a coach, you have to guide your athletes in this process. Last year, after the Independence Day, I've found this short story, which was published, I think, in one of the big Indian newspapers. Yeah, what I mentioned, it's probably not the approach we're using right now in Indian culture. But if we want to develop more successful athletes, we have to rethink the idea of nurturing them. Yeah, they have to become, in a certain way, equal to us. Because as coaches, we want to develop not only successful athletes, we want to be seen as people who are educating successful people in life as well. And that means we need to develop independency of our athletes. Talking about coaches education, we are in generally describing two different levels. The first level is this, which affects coaching behavior. Yeah, and this is your personal characteristics, your knowledge as a coach, the philosophy you're using, social demands. Are you working in a school? Are you working with young athletes? Are you working with senior athletes? Yeah? Of course, the characteristics of the athletes themselves becomes very important. The physical, mental, social characteristics, and the so-called contextual factors, the resources you have available for your coaching. We know that not every coach is able to conduct coaching on a track, for example, in India. Mr. Adile, our president, yesterday mentioned that we are strongly looking forward to have more than 600 districts participating in the NITJAM. Of course, there's not a track in all these 600 districts. Hopefully, in a few years, we will find the situation. But right now, in some districts, we only have mud track, if we have a track at all. Sometimes it's just a grass patch. But that's another advantage of athletics. You don't necessarily need a track or a 400-meter track to develop successful athletes. Yeah, but this kind of resources, whether you have a gym available, what kind of equipment you have, how much time you have for training. These are all contextual factors which are affecting your behavior as a coach. And then the second level, those are the things which represent coaching behavior. In competition, for example, the interaction with your athlete before, during, and after the competition. Yeah, do you describe or do you develop a certain tactic for the middle and long distance runners, for example? How do you coach a long jumper during the 6 approaches? What are you doing a rehearsal after the competition? Yeah, are you encouraging your athletes or do you point out the mistakes? These are the things which affect coaching in competition. Of course, when it comes to training, technical, mental, moral, and tactical development, how do you approach these skills? How do you want to condition your athletes? What kind of intervention style you use? And then, of course, the organization, planning, and managing your training. Yeah, so we need to develop a good understanding of ourselves. How are we dealing with our coaching behavior? Yeah, regarding our own characteristics, the athlete characteristics, and the contextual factors. And how are these behaviors represented in competition, training, and organization? And it's impossible to see coaches as learners separate from these activities because you're regularly engaged in them. And it's not possible to act independent from your environment because it will not provide a clear picture of this. So when you are establishing your private coaching philosophy, always think about the 2 levels and the factors addressing these 2 levels. Coaches' development, especially in sports, is a constant progression. And during the coaching career, all coaches undergo a progression from newcomer. For example, if you're new to coaching, if you just started coaching maybe with your group a few weeks ago, to become a competent coach after a while, followed by super competent if you gain a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience. And the ultimate state of coaching is the so-called innovator level. And these innovators are people who are able to apply knowledge they gained, for example, in scientific articles, but also in other sport scientific fields. And they're able to apply this knowledge on the track with your athletes. And this progression from a newcomer to an innovator coach is mainly depending on a fact called deliberate reflection. Deliberate reflection means that you constantly question yourself. After every training session, if you're going back home, sitting on the couch or sitting in the car, you have to ask yourself, what went well during today's session and what do I have to improve? Yeah, this is deliberate reflection, that you constantly try to work on your own quality as a coach. This, of course, requires a so-called growth mindset. You have to be open-minded and you need to develop this ability to introspect. Introspection means you look into yourself and you try to find ways not only to improve your athletes, but to improve your own coaching competency as well. There was a very interesting study conducted in the United States, and some scientists dealing with the field of coaching, they have asked the top coaches from the 3 major sport leagues in America, the National Football League, the National Basketball League, and the National Hockey League, what is the main characteristics of a successful coach? And interestingly, these coaches, they did not say knowledge or experience. Actually, most of them came up with the term vulnerability. A successful coach has to be vulnerable, and you have to be able to deal with this vulnerability. You have to be able to deal with criticism, and you need to learn from this criticism. Yeah, and that's what we call, again, deliberate reflection. You have to admit to do mistakes. This is absolutely fine. Again, it's not necessarily part of the Indian culture to do these mistakes. We're always trying to avoid them or to distract from them. But it is important that we admit to do these mistakes in coaching, and that's perfectly fine. The only thing which you have to avoid is repeating the same mistake twice, because that means that we are not learning from our failure. But coaching is always a bit of try and error. We're dealing with human beings, and that means we cannot be 100% sure that things are working out the way we planned for them. Yeah, there will always be ideas or situations where you're not 100% in line with what you plan to do, and that's fine. And if you think of introducing new exercises, new training methods, it might be that they're not working. But again, that's absolutely fine. We just have to learn from our mistakes. Yeah, and these innovators, they are particularly good at associating, questioning, observing, experimenting, and networking. But this you can already see, especially experimenting will also cause situations where you are failing. So talking about this conceptual model of coaching, coaches' behaviors, dispositions, education, and experiences are determinants of coaching success. And this is what we summarize as coaching knowledge. So knowledge is not only regarding your scientific knowledge, it also includes the way you are acting on the track. Yeah, it depends on your education, of course, your level 1 or level 2 or even level 3 coaching license, and the experience you have made on the track. So knowledge here represents a complex structure of coaches' declarative and procedural knowledge. So declarative means what we know, and procedural means what we do. And interestingly, often there's a discrepancy, because not everything what you know, you're going to apply. After these 5 weeks of the SCI and AFI coaching course, you might have increased your knowledge. But this increased knowledge will not necessarily help you if you do not apply it, because only if a coach is able to use or to apply this training on the track or on the gym, that's where the real learning is going to happen, because you always have to adjust it in one way or the other to your athlete. And that's the athlete's outcome, which is the second important component of this conceptual coaching model. It reflects the variations in athletes' attitudes, their behaviors, or performances that can result from different types of coaching. We all know that certain athletes, they're doing very well with one coach, and then they're transferring to another coach, and out of a sudden, they're not performing any longer. There might be several reasons for that. Maybe the first coach was already specializing too early. Often we also see that an athlete who is not very successful is changing the coach, and out of a sudden, he becomes more successful. And it's not always about the training methods you're applying. Sometimes it's more about the way you are acting, you are corresponding or communicating with these athletes. Yeah, so always keep in mind the athlete outcome, which depends on the attitude, behaviors, or the performances. And the third time, I've mentioned earlier, is the coaching context, which again explains the coaching environment. Are you coaching at a national junior center, at a school, at the national camp? What kind of equipment and facilities do you have available? This makes a huge impact. And a comprehensive definition of coaching effectiveness and expertise should always integrate these 3 components. Yeah, your own personal knowledge, the athlete's outcome, and the coaching context. And we're going a bit more into detail regarding these 3 aspects.
Walker, 1 minute. Please, I request the participants not to scribble with the screen. It's giving a lot of marking on our PowerPoint. Please kindly don't do that. We will give you all recording. No need to take a screenshot or to try to save it. Please don't scribble with the screen. Thank you.
Yeah, I will quickly stop and restart. So talking about coaches' knowledge, we're talking about the integration of the triad of coaching knowledge, and that includes 3 aspects. It includes professional, interpersonal, and intrapersonal knowledge. Professional knowledge again means, what do you know? Do you have a degree in sports science? Do you have a level 1 or level 2 coaching certificate? Interpersonal knowledge describes the interaction or communication with you and your athletes, or with you and your head coach, with you and the federation. And intrapersonal knowledge is what you know about yourself. Yeah, remember this introspection, deliberate reflection. And you have to increase your knowledge constantly regarding all three fields. The professional field, yeah, update your knowledge and your skills. The interpersonal knowledge, you have to update your communication skills, because what you are saying as a coach is not necessarily exactly the same what the athlete is understanding. And your intrapersonal knowledge, how are you reacting in certain situations? And I can just encourage all of you, especially as a coach, to conduct personality tests, for example. There are a few websites which are offering this for free. We might be able to share the link with you afterwards. But it's really interesting to see what kind of personality type you are as a coach and how are you perceived by others, because this will directly impact your coaching. Yeah, and of course, at some level, the three forms will overlap. And already 20 years ago, one sports scientist suggested that the link among these traits results in the following: good habits of thinking, maturity in your decisions, wisdom, and the capacity to make reasonable judgments. So by talking about your coaching philosophy, think about your professional, interpersonal, and intrapersonal knowledge, and how are you able to apply these four aspects: your good habits, your maturity, wisdom, and the capacity to reason and to make the right judgment with your athletes. So regarding the coach's interpersonal knowledge, this effectiveness depends on the communication between you as an individual and the group, the athletes in front of you. And coaching is always a complex, reciprocally influential process based on systems of social interaction. And it is important for coaches to continuously improve this interpersonal knowledge base. It makes a huge difference if you're talking to a 13-year-old girl or a 25-year-old girl. Yeah, you have to approach them in a different way. It makes a huge difference regarding motivation. If you shout to an athlete because you're not happy with the performance, or if you try to understand the athlete, why is he facing difficulties in executing an exercise the way you want to see him? Yeah, so you really need to encourage your athletes. You have to think about your interpersonal knowledge, the way you're communicating, because we should, in this athlete-centered approach, we should create a trustworthy environment. And this trustworthy environment will help you to get the right feedback from your athletes. But to gain trust, that's something we will discuss later. Of course, you also have to avoid a situation where you're blaming the athletes, where you're shouting on the athletes. And you know, I'm pretty sure all of you know some coaches who are still doing that, a very old school way. But I'm pretty sure if you're talking to your athletes in a reasonable way, you will see that the athletes actually don't really like that. And especially in the modern world, the athletes have a lot of access to information themselves via Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Yeah, you have to create a very, very efficient and productive communication. Because as coaches, it's important that we always at least 2 steps ahead of our athletes. And only if we're able to be regarding the knowledge further than our athletes, if we have a higher knowledge base, we can develop this trustworthy style of communication. And that again depends also on your intrapersonal knowledge, the understanding of yourself, and the ability to introspect and to reflect. So coaches have to translate experience into knowledge and skills. That's one of the key messages here. Find a better way to understand yourself. How are you reacting in certain situations? And try to improve the way you are communicating with your athletes. Encourage your athletes to give feedback and build a trustworthy relationship. The next thing was the athlete's outcome. And effective coaching results either in performance outcomes, which you can measure in terms of win-loss percentages, individual player development, or success at a national or international level, positive psychological responses on part of the athletes, like a higher self-esteem, higher perceived ability, intrinsic motivation, or just a high level of sport enjoyment and satisfaction. Yesterday, I mentioned in the last slide that fun is very important. And you could see our elite 400-meter group doing some games at the beach in the general preparation phase. Yeah, having a high level of fun in your training becomes crucial if you want to engage the athletes, if you want to motivate your athletes. Performance, on the other hand, is not only happening, or you can not only detect performance in a competition. Every single training session should be happening with an enhanced performance level. And the highest motivation for an athlete is usually if they see that they are developing themselves, if they are getting better. But again, that does not necessarily just apply to the competition itself. If an athlete realizes that the endurance level is increasing, if they realize they have a higher strength level, for example, in the general preparation or special preparation, this already offers a high level of motivation to these athletes. And this is something we have to implement in our process as coaches as well. We need to identify fields where our players are able to improve. Because if they realize that they're getting better, that they're getting stronger or faster, that the technique is enhancing during the process of training, we will increase their motivation and we will increase their self-esteem. So as coaches, we have to focus on the so-called 4 C's. Desirable outcomes emerging from an interaction between athletes and coaches. And this is the competency of an athlete, the confidence, the connection, and the character. Yeah, character means we need to develop a personality. A young athlete, when they're training maybe 7-8 times a week, let's say 2 to 2.5 hours, they're spending approximately 15 to 20 hours with you as a coach. And that comes with a high responsibility. If as a coach you're spending so much time, that means you're probably spending more time with the athlete than this athlete is spending with his own talent, with his own parents. And if this is happening at a crucial period of their character building, for example, during puberty, yeah, that means you have a high responsibility, not only for the performance level of these athletes, but also regarding the character building. We are developing athletes not only to be successful in sport, but to be successful in life. And the way we are approaching these athletes, especially during puberty, when the athletes are developing this ability to introspect, to reflect their own actions, will have a very, very high impact. So we have to work. The second C is the connection. Yeah, the way we are communicating with our athletes. And again, encourage them to provide feedback in a positive, constructive way. We have to develop the confidence of our athletes. So shouting at them, blaming them, definitely will not help to develop the athlete's confidence. So we have to find other ways, positive ways, to make our training fun and to develop the self-esteem for them to see that they're progressing not only in the competition, but also in training. And we have to improve the athlete's competency, because only a competent athlete will be able to provide efficient feedback to you as a coach. If you are asking an athlete, for example, how did you feel during the last exercise, or how did you feel while doing a clean in the gym, and the athlete is just able to say good or bad, that's not really helpful information for you as a coach. And it's a sign that your athlete is not dealing with a high competency. Yeah, a good answer should be, yeah, I've had difficulties, for example, when I was catching the weight, I didn't bend my knees far enough. So we need to develop our athletes in a way that they're able to provide competency. And earlier I mentioned that successful coaches are not necessarily good coaches or competent coaches. And from coaching literature, we know that the best way to evaluate the level of a coach, the quality of a coach, is to have a look onto the competency of his or her athletes. So the athlete's level of competency in their sport, in athletics, in the different event groups, is the most obvious outcome of coaching. So in other words, only if you are able to develop competent athletes who are able to provide proper feedback, who are independent, who are confident, only then you can be regarded as a quality or efficient coach. Yeah, and we have, okay, we discussed this already, the competency, of course, regarding sport-specific technical and tactical skills, performance skills, like how do you enter the competition. It also includes improved health and fitness and healthy training habits. You might be training once or twice with your athletes. That means you're covering 2 or 4 hours of your athlete's daily life. But it's very crucial to see or to understand what happens in the remaining 20, 22 hours. Because you know, it's not only about the load you're providing in training, it's also about the recovery. And the person responsible for the recovery is the athlete, him or herself. And only if the athletes develop a healthy training habit, if they watch their nutrition, if they ensure they're recovering fast enough, that's all part of their competence. And only if they're developing these qualities, they will eventually become successful. Yeah, confidence just means an internal sense of overall positive self-worth. Connection means positive bonds and social relationships with people inside and outside of the sport. And character, of course, is respect for others regarding the moral integrity, empathy, and of course, responsibility. And it's our duty as coaches to teach this 4 C's, the athlete's outcomes, regularly on a daily basis. And we call this type of coaching servant leadership style. Yeah, so results show that athletes of coaches who fit this profile of servant leaders score significantly higher on almost all measures of athlete competency and confidence. So if you are able to apply a kind of different coaching style, this servant leadership style, where you're guiding your athletes, at the same time you're supporting them in becoming better human beings, it will definitely impact your athlete's career in a very positive way. They become better human beings and they will become more successful athletes as well. And this lack in competence, confidence, connection, and character, I'm pretty sure is also a reason why India, as you could see yesterday, is not yet performing as successful as we could do it. Yeah, so development of highly motivated, self-determined, and invested individuals in any domain requires an environment that provides opportunity to make autonomous decisions, to develop competency, and to feel connected to others. So we need to create an environment in our training where we are providing chances for our athletes to grow. And that means that, for example, you can involve your athletes in the designing of your training program. Yeah, you can give them a choice. Do you want to either do this program today, or do you want to do another program? Do you prefer to do 3 sets of 4 times 200, or do you prefer to do 3 sets of 6 times 100 meter, for example, if you're looking for an extensive interval training? You might ask them, do you prefer to do a clean today, or do you prefer to do a squat? Of course, it should all be in line with your ideas of coaching, in line with the biomotor abilities you want to develop. But step by step, try to give a bit of responsibility for the training to your athletes. When you're training with young athletes, it's the responsibility of us as coaches to expose them to a lot of variety. Yeah, try to use as many different sporting skills, motor skills as possible, so that the athlete is not only able to develop the motor skills, the coordination, but that they also get a certain idea of exercises, of training methods, that they're able to differentiate what works very well for them, what probably does not work, because there's also psychological aspect to it. Yeah, some athletes, for example, they like to do double leg exercises, like a double leg deep squat, for example. Other athletes, they prefer to do single leg exercises, like a single leg squat. And if you know that in the beginning of a season, in general preparation, special preparation, we would always try to get our athletes out of the comfort zone. When we're coming closer to the competition, we have to ensure that our athletes feel comfortable to build this confidence. So that means if you have, for example, a long jumper, and a lot of them, they prefer single leg exercise. In the beginning of the season, you try to bring them out of their comfort zone to have this growth of their mindset. So you do double leg exercises. But when you're coming closer to the competition, like in the pre-competition period, you know, okay, I want this athlete to become more comfortable, to develop a high self-confidence. So you use more favorable exercises like a single leg squat, for example, when we're talking about strength training. Yeah, so in the beginning, use exercises which are challenging the athletes, not only physically, but also mentally. When you're coming closer to the competition, use exercises which the athletes like to use. Within the next weeks, we will discuss a lot of sports scientific aspects with you as well, regarding strength training, regarding speed training, endurance training, also regarding the development of certain skills, how to use specific exercises. And it's very normal that you will be surprised with a lot of these exercises. That's an experience we have made during the level 1 courses, but also regarding the level 2 courses. To be very frank with you, in India, we realize that there are a lot of outdated training methods. And the reasons are pretty clear. In India, the training is still, in many cases, volume orientated. And the reason for that is that there is a huge impact from the former Soviet training system, which was mainly volume orientated, but not quality orientated. It worked very well as long as coaches used forbidden substances to shorten the recovery time. Since we are not able to do that any longer, and again, what Mr. Adila mentioned yesterday, we are strongly encouraging you not to motivate your athlete to do the same. Yeah, so please avoid taking any additional supplements. If you're not able to do that any longer, that means we have longer recovery time. And longer recovery time means we have to reduce the volume. If you're not able to apply such a high volume any longer, especially for the sprinters, jumpers, and throwers, that means we have to focus more on the quality side, the quality aspect of training. And that requires a change of mindset for our coaches. We have to introduce a new coaching style. Yeah, especially for the sprint training, the jumpers training, and the throwers training, because again, the quality, the technical aspect of this training becomes more important. It's also about the intensity. In athletics, for example, when you have a senior athlete, we're not doing a lot of hypertrophy training any longer because we don't want the body weight to go up. We're focusing more on intra and intermuscular strength training with a much higher intensity. And yesterday you could see that the worldwide timings of 400-meter runners or of shot putters, the distances, are still increasing throughout the last year. And the reason for that is a change in training methodology. Coaches are more focusing on the intensity and they're paying less attention to the overall volume training. And this, of course, requires a change in mindset. You've already learned that successful coaches have a growth mindset. They're able to change their perception, their idea of training. And we really hope that within the next weeks that you are able to change your mindset as well. And just to give you a brief idea of what's going to happen is according to the so-called Kübler-Ross change curve. A lot of the contents you will listen to in the next weeks might shock you in the beginning. You will be surprised that, for example, we don't do high knee exercises any longer because we don't want our athletes to focus on a hip flexion. Instead, we always focus on the hip extension. After this first phase of surprise, there might be another phase of denial, disbelief. You're looking for evidence that this isn't true. Because if you have to admit that the modern athletes, the world-class athletes are doing exercise in a different way than you are doing it, it also means that you probably have done it in a wrong way for the last 10, 20, 30 years. Yeah, and this is the reason which is causing this disbelief. Maybe after a while, it will turn into frustration. You recognize that things are different. Yeah, if you Google hip extension rather than hip flexion, you will find that 99% of the modern sprint coaches or jump coaches are using it nowadays. And this phase then is followed by a depression. You might even have a low mood, you might lack in energy. But once you overcome this phase of short depression, you start experimenting. With initial engagement, you try to apply, maybe to adjust some of your exercises. You might use some of the new exercises, the new skills we are introducing within the next week. And then you make a decision to integrate these changes into your training program. And this is the phase where you become a renewed individual, where you develop this growth mindset. And we hope that you are able to overcome the first 3 stages, denial, frustration, depression, as fast as possible, and that you start experimenting. Yeah, what I mentioned in the beginning, it's not just sitting here listening to us talking about coaching development and the development of sports scientific factors. You have to apply them on the ground. And that always includes an element of surprise. You are experimenting with your athletes. And maybe 40–50% of the things you're applying will not work the first time. Yeah, but you have to be consistent. Don't give up too early to make a decision to become a competent or super competent coach. Coaching is always about doing mistakes. Yeah, we have to apply all our knowledge, and not every human being is responding in the same way. But you can only develop as a coach if you're doing this mistake. Because usually, if you are successful with your athletes, there's no reason to doubt yourself. There's no need to clarify, to have a very intensive look into the matter, because you think, okay, it's a sexual system, so we'll just go ahead. But coaches learn the most by doing mistakes. And that's what this slide is about. Forget the mistakes, but remember the lesson. It's okay to do mistakes, just avoid doing them twice. And be open-minded and find a way to learn not only from your mistakes, but also try to learn from the mistakes other coaches have been doing already. So constantly engage yourself in discussion with your fellow coaches, with your coaching friends on the track, maybe with some PE teachers in the school. Yeah, because if you're talking with each other, there's no way that you're losing knowledge. You can only gain knowledge if you have a constructive communication with your colleagues. A very important aspect, and not only for the younger coaches, is mentoring. Yeah, regarding, of course, the coaching, your personal development, regarding your introspection, but also regarding the direction, which way you want to go. How do you deal with success? You need mentors sometimes just to give advice, to motivate you train, and to train the coaches, specifically regarding a goal setting. And then an important aspect, of course, of mentoring is as well supporting each other. Every world-class coach has been in touch with so-called mentors. Yeah, often it's 2 or 3 coaches with a high level of experience. And I can guarantee you that if you approach successful coaches, they are like open books. They're willing to share everything because they know that there are no secrets any longer. Yeah, you can find all the information online. For you, it's just important to understand how are you able to filter this information. Because if you go to YouTube and if you Google running drills, for example, you will find 80% of the exercises are actually not very helpful. But successful coaches have the ability to separate the good exercises or the good content from the less efficient content. And to develop yourself as a coach from a newcomer to competent, super competent, you need someone to guide you on this way. So don't just look for people you can have a regular exchange with. Also look for people who have more experience than you, who probably more successful, and especially people who have a different coaching style than you have. Yeah, so that you're constantly confronting yourself with a new idea. So again, I can just encourage you, look for mentors. And we have a lot of level 2 coaches from all around the country. So talk to these guys, ask them for advice, and build a trustworthy relationship. Because this mentoring aspect, it does not only take 2 or 3 weeks. Often it's a lifelong process that a mentor is working with one of the scholars throughout the coach's life or coach's career. I've already brought up this topic of the coach-athlete relationship. Yeah, remember, one of the 4 C's is the connection. How are you talking to your athlete? What kind of relationship do you have with your athlete? And if you look at the 2 pictures on the right, you will see 2 completely different ways of coaching. Yeah, the top guy on the top, he's shouting to this volleyball player, whereas the guy on the bottom, he's explaining in a very calm way what his athletes have to do. And I leave it to you to make a decision in which situation the athlete is learning more, in which situation the athlete is building more self-confidence, a higher self-esteem. I leave it to you to decide which is the more constructive way of talking to your athlete. But what you have to do is to develop a positive relationship with your athletes. If your athletes are scared by you, if they're afraid of you getting angry, it will be impossible to build a trustworthy relationship. You have to encourage feedback and you need to create ownership. You have to increase the competency of your athletes because remember, this is the sign, the most single factor describing the quality of a coach. And you have to align your goals. You have to develop or increase the intrinsic motivation of your athletes. Yeah, in India, we're facing a situation where a lot of athletes, they want to see, okay, they want to gain money or they want to earn some money from the sport, and that's fine. Yeah, that's necessary as well. But you need to increase the intrinsic motivation that the athlete becomes desperate of improving his performance. Not to make a lot of money, not to get a lot of public recognition, but just to become better in his field of expertise. And together with your athletes, you have to create a culture of shared successes in training and of competition. Yeah, that you understand. It's not only the athletes and it's not only the coaches who are responsible for an improved athlete's ability. It's actually a combination of both. Athletes and coaches, they have to work together towards the same goal. And to build this trustworthy relationship, you need to follow a few aspects because trust always is based on communication. Yeah, you need to have a positive way, an encouraging way to talk to your athletes. And communications, again, needs alignment. You have to ensure that you're working in the same direction, that you're working on the same goal. If you have an athlete and maybe your state secretary is asking you, okay, how fast is this athlete going to run in the national junior championships? And you tell them, yeah, he's running 10.5 seconds because you want to be seen as a successful coach. But your athlete only believes that he's able to run 10.8 seconds. This is the opposite of alignment. So before sharing your athlete's goals with someone, you first have to discuss them with your athlete to ensure again that you're working in the same direction. Yeah, if you say, okay, your athlete is able to run 10.5, but your athlete only says, okay, coach, maybe I'm running 10.8 next season, you have to understand, you have to identify what is the reason. Why does the athlete not believe in himself? Or are you probably overestimating the athlete? So it's better to have a discussion and maybe you align yourself and saying, okay, we are working on 10.7 next year, which is a bit faster than the athlete wanted to do and a bit slower than your idea. Yeah, you need to find a common goal. And this most common goal for athletes and coaches is an improved performance level in training and competition. AFI, with the national athletes, we've developed actually a questionnaire to work not only on performance goals, but also on so-called development goals. We want our athletes, of course, to excel in competition, which is a performance goal, but we've also fixed development goals. We had a small survey with our athletes, and they had to estimate what are their personal strengths and weaknesses regarding the different biomotor abilities, regarding their technique, but also regarding their self-esteem, their self-confidence. And a development goal might be for a coach and an athlete, for example, to work on the self-confidence. It might also be to say, okay, we want to increase our strength level. We want to improve certain technical aspects of our training. Because these development goals will eventually lead to an increased or improved performance level as well. Having this improved performance level requires a long-term planning. And again, please do not look forward to develop national medal winners at the youth or junior category. Our goal, our common goal between the federation and you, the coaches on the ground, has to be to develop athletes who are able to succeed on the international stage. Your goal, as well as AFI's goal, has to be to produce medal winners at the 2004 and 2028 Olympic Games. And this requires, of course, an improved level of all biomotor abilities, as well as enhanced technical and coordinative skills. And what I mentioned yesterday already, this physical and technical development have to go along with each other. So also, please tell your athletes that you don't want them to succeed at the age of 16 or 17. Also, convince the athletes' parents that it does not make sense to be successful at this stage. Because we know that if you're doing very, very well, or your athletes are doing very, very well at such a young age, the chances that they're not able to succeed later on are very high. And this holistic training process offers a fundamental base upon they're able to train, to recover, and also to develop their mindset. I think you all know this. If you talk about goal setting, every goal setting has to follow the SMART rule. A goal has to be specific. If you're telling, okay, we want to work on the strength, it makes no sense to say we want to become stronger, because that's very unspecific. You might know that your athlete is able to do a bench press with 50 kg in 2020. So you say, okay, to make the goal specific, we want to increase your bench press personal best by 25%. So that the athlete is able to do 50 kg in 2021. It has to be measurable, yeah? Increasing the weight, improving the time, increasing the endurance. These are all measurable aspects, and that's a huge advantage of athletics. In other sports, it's much harder to measure an improved performance level. They have to be achievable. That's what I mentioned earlier. If you're telling your athlete the goal is 10.5 and you have a personal best of 11.0, that makes no sense. It might actually be demotivating. So align yourself with the athlete and formulate an achievable goal, which is realistic. And it has to be timely. Yeah, fix your goals for the next season, fix your goals for the next training phases, and again, follow this SMARTer rule. Another important aspect when we're talking about developing these athletes, which you should include in your coaching philosophy, is to constantly get your athletes out of their comfort zone. Yeah, to work on their mindset, to make them confident, to develop the self-esteem, to provide proficient feedback. So instead of increasing our athletes' comfort zone, we have to constantly encourage them to leave it and to take responsibility for their own actions. Because only athletes with a very strong mindset will be able to succeed at an international stage. If you are going to World Championships or one of these international meetings in the USA or in Europe, like a Diamond League meeting, and if you're talking to these athletes, you will always find very strong individual human beings who are extremely confident. And you have to know that most of these athletes, when they're going to this international competition, they are going there without their coaches being around. So we have to make the athletes independent from us. As long as an athlete is depending on the coach being around, guiding them directly, the chances for these athletes to become successful are definitely reduced. And as coaches, we have to be role models and we need to lead by example. So even for yourself, you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. For a coach, that means we have to constantly question ourselves. We have to constantly engage ourselves in discussion. And we have to make ourselves vulnerable. We have to admit that we are doing mistakes, because only if we are living that way, we will be able to convince our athletes to follow the same approach. I really like this quote by an American philosopher. We have to train animals, but to educate people. It simply summarizes all the aspects we've discussed right now. We have to improve the quality of our training, the physical training, following the laws of nature. But at the same time, we need to educate people, successful persons who are not just succeeding on the track or in the field, but who are able to succeed in life. And when it comes to building your own coaching philosophy, please ask these questions to yourself. And that's according to one of the most famous researchers in the field of coaching, Wade Gilbert. And ask the question, why do I coach? What are my values of coaching? What we discussed on the very first slide. What type of experience do I want my athletes to have? How do you want to be seen as a coach? What is your definition of athletic success? And again, that's not only depending on medals. What is the purpose of sport? Why are your athletes doing that? What are your responsibilities to your athletes? And if you're dealing with very young athletes, also, what are the responsibilities towards the parents? How do you want to discipline your athletes? Do you want to shout to them, or do you want to explain to them why certain things do not work? Yeah, and always consider communication and trust building. And this is also related to the last question, what are my ethical standards? So please work on this coaching philosophy, write it down, and have a regular look into the things you have written down. Because I can guarantee you that this philosophy will change over the years. Just to give you a personal example of mine, I started coaching very, very early when I was 17 years old, because there was a vacancy in the local club I was competing for as an athlete, and they just asked me that I would like to become an assistant coach. And I said, okay, no problem. So I became an assistant coach at the age of 17. Unfortunately, after 4 weeks, the main coach had to leave. And they couldn't find another main coach, so I had to take responsibility for this group. If I'm looking back to my coaching at the age of 17, I can guarantee you that I would not have given myself a coaching certificate for that. Because I did what every other human being was doing. I just copied the things I used to do as an athlete. And this was definitely the wrong thing to do. At this time, unfortunately, I have to, not unfortunately, but at this time, my athletes, they have been quite successful, which was because I was dealing with early specialization. And they were successful, not because of my training, but despite that. And only when I was able to find a different mentor, I was able to change my coaching. So by looking for new mentors, these mentors will have a very strong impact on your coaching philosophy. And if I'm looking back to my current coaching philosophy in comparison to the philosophy 18 years ago, I have to say it's entirely different. And I would say it's much better than it was 15, 16, 17 years ago because of more knowledge and more experiences. Yeah, so ask yourself these questions, look for mentors, and try to constantly update your philosophy. Because with more athletes, you will also get a better understanding of yourself, of your own strengths and weaknesses as a coach. And don't see it as a threat, see it as an opportunity for your own personal growth. And that's the session for today. I will stop sharing my presentation, and if there are some questions, I will ask Mr. Radhakrishnan and Mr. Rajmo and Mr. Nagesh to come up with them right now.
Mr. Walker, it was a very good session. Of course, we had some learning about coaching philosophy in our level 1, but it is a little bit much higher standard. Mr. Walker spoke. Now I request our president, Mr. Adisu Mariwalaji, if you like to speak something, sir. Hello. Hello? No.
Yeah. Volker, thank you.
A pleasure.
Okay. No, thank you very much. I've been through the whole session today. I think very interesting. I think uh, our basic thought process on how we coach, I think we need to review that. We have a certain thought process of Guru Chela in India. I think in today's time, the respect of Guru Chela still remains, while I think it's a two-way communication. The Guru Chela communication is only one way. I don't think that works anymore in athletics, at least, or in any other way in the 21st century. And therefore, we need to completely change our philosophy into a thought process where it is more communicative, where it is more interactive, where you take a lot of feedback. And I think that is something that's going to make us better coaches. So I have nothing more to add. Just a couple of hygiene items. Please stop fooling with the screen. Please stop scratching the screen. Rather, please put out some of the do's and don'ts, because people are trying to play with the screen. They're trying to copy the screen. They're trying to record. They're trying to do all sorts of funny things instead of paying attention. Instead of paying attention to the presentation, and that is causing scratches for everybody else, and is becoming very, very difficult and tedious. Becoming very difficult and tedious for others who are watching the screen to see scratches. So my request to you once again is, please keep a paper and pencil, write your notes. Please don't play with the screen. Remember, there are 400 other people together with you. There today 435, 436 people who are there. Also avoid this good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because it's just filling up the chat. Please ask your questions on the chat. Please keep it only for that. There is no need. We electronically, we have your attendance, whoever is there. So there is no need for you to say, so-and-so from here, good morning, so-and-so from there, good morning, chief coach of XYZ place, good morning, good afternoon. Please restrict this to being very professional. This is not like a WhatsApp group where everybody starts good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Keep this very professional. You all are all professional coaches. You all are all senior coaches. And I'm very thankful to Volker and Radha, who have, sat and spent a lot of time in creating the data for you. Nagesh, Rajmohan, who are assisting them. So thank you very much. I look forward to joining you again on Monday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please, Volker, you can answer the question. I'm also interested in knowing some of the answers.
Thank you. Okay, Rajmohan, Nagesh, have you filtered some of the questions? I've just seen one question on the screen, whether I can elaborate more on servant leadership. The servant leadership actually describes the partnership between an athlete and the coach. What Mr. Adila mentioned, it's not a one-sided approach any longer. The coach, of course, has the responsibility to develop the athlete, but not only regarding the physical or technical aspects. It's about a mental process as well. If you talk to a world-class athlete, you will find several of them who are actually doing their training themselves. So if you are a young athlete, of course, you're receiving the training program from the coach and you're working on it. But as older, as more experienced the athlete becomes, as more responsibility do they take for their own training. And you will find a lot of examples at world class where the athletes are actually the athletes are actually structuring their own training week, their own microcycle, and where the coach takes a step back from coaching and becomes more consultant for the athletes. And that's exactly what we want to do with the athletes. We want to develop them so that eventually that the athletes know exactly what they have to do and that they develop a very good feeling for themselves. Because none of us is able to look inside the athlete's body. The best person to evaluate the athlete's predisposition, the athlete's physical, mental, technical position is actually the athlete, him or herself. And that's the reason why we have to put so much effort in creating a trustworthy environment and encouraging the athlete in providing this feedback. Servant leadership just means we are developing the athlete on this way, yeah, regarding growth, regarding ownership, and that we step by step develop the athlete into direction where the athlete is eventually, maybe at the age of 25, 26, able to structure and to plan his own training, consulted by the coach, but not directly coached any longer. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Sir, again, a question from Gurvinder Singh. He is asking, individualized training can start at which age?
Sorry, I can't understand you.
Individualization training can start at which age?
Which training?
Rajmohan, little more louder, please.
Individualization training, sir.
I think your mic is not working.
Individualization training.
Yeah, the question is, when do we start individualizing the training? That's a very good question. Of course, you cannot individualize the training if you have a school class, if you have 30, 40, sometimes 50 athletes together in one group. But even if this is the situation which we face in a lot of schools, you need to build subgroups within your training class. Yeah, that you rank your athletes maybe according to their developmental age, maybe regarding the quality in which they're executing the exercises. The real individualization starts with the event group specialization. When your athletes decide, okay, I'm becoming a jumper or a sprinter or middle distance runner, that's when the individualized approach of training takes place. And that, of course, does not work if you have a huge amount of athletes. With top athletes, you cannot have more than, I would say, 6 to 8 athletes, especially in the technical events, in your group. That means you either have to split the group or you have to get an assistant coach. If you have a larger group and you want to individualize your training, that's very difficult. So my advice would be always focus on the most talented athletes in your group. Yeah, if you're dealing with 30 juice players below the age of 16, 17, try to identify who are the 1 or 2 most talented athletes in your group and structure your training according to them. Yeah, but again, this individualized process has to take place from the age of 16, 17, 18 onwards. Before that, it's more a group approach where you try to expose the athletes to as many loads as possible.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. The second question asked by Shweta, what is more important, intensity or volume?
Yeah, what is more important, intensity or volume? This is probably not related to today's topic, but if you joined yesterday's session, I think it's very, very clear that the intensity is way more important than volume, except the middle and long distance event. In middle long distance, we need to increase the basic endurance level. We need to improve the running speed at the lactate threshold. We need to increase the maximum oxygen consumption, the VO2 max. And that, of course, requires a certain volume. But if you compare the volume nowadays, in comparison with the 90s, for example, you can also see that in some events, it's a bit reduced. And athletes doing more work around the threshold below between 4 and 7 millimole of lactic acid to develop this VO2 max predominantly. But in all other events, sprints, jumps, throws, and even the multi-events, you need to follow an intensity approach, because this volume approach will not help you to develop your fast twitch fibers, for example. It will not help you to develop a decent technical level. So please emphasize on quality in your training, because quality always equals intensity. And you need to understand that a higher intensity requires more recovery. And these 10 sessions we always found in India, whether you're in Punjab or in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, yeah, there is this classical model that we have 10 training sessions a week, double sessions Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and a single session on Wednesday and Saturday. It does not make sense, because 10 sessions, especially for the young players below the age of 18, 19, is way too much. We have world-class sprinters and jumpers who are not training more than 5 or 6 sessions a week. Yeah, the majority of 100-meter sprinters or long jumpers, they are not training more than 5, 6, 7 times a week, because it's an intensity approach, and more intensity requires more recovery. If you are working in an institution, I understand that often this institution, if you're only training 5 sessions a week, they will say, hey coach, you're not doing your job. Yeah, they are blaming you for being lazy. So to overcome this, you might have to find a way to work around them. Yeah, use the afternoon sessions to do maybe some yoga, some flexibility, or do some recovery sessions. But try to avoid a situation where you are overloading the athletes. And yesterday in the presentation, you've probably seen, in the age of 14, 15, athletes all around the world are usually only training 3 to 4, maybe 5 times a week. 16, 17, maximum 5, 6 sessions a week. And then for the distance athletes and the throwers, you're probably adding 1 or 2 sessions every 2 years. But please change your mindset, show that you are able to grow as a coach, and focus on the quality. And every single aspect of your training has to follow this quality approach. Yeah, whether it's a simple running drill or whether it's a gym exercise you're conducting. Always ensure that you have a high quality. On next week, Monday, I will explain you more why we need to follow this intensity, especially when it comes to the development of speed. Okay, next question, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Sir, second question is, please explain the escort system in relationship.
Which system?
Escort system.
Escort system actually means exactly the same as servant leadership. Yeah, we are escorting, we are supporting the athlete throughout the development of his career.
Sir, can you please explain 6 components of coaching education? 6 components of coaching education.
Yeah, remember, these were the 2 different levels. We have one level which is affecting your coaching directly. Yeah, and we have another 1 level, including the 3 factors, which affect your coaching style. We will share the presentation with you later, and you will find all the information on the slide. Yeah, so that you can use it to develop your own philosophy as well.
Sir, the next question is, do you think coaching philosophy is individualistic, or it is generalized philosophy or sports in common?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Every coaching philosophy should follow certain guidelines, what we've discussed. Yeah, that you incorporate the 4 C's, the competency, the connection, the character building, and so on. You have to be able to answer all the questions from the last slide. But of course, the coaching philosophy is a very individual process to develop it. Every human being has a different personality, and your personality already has a huge impact the way you're communicating with others. Yeah, in our case, it might be even more different because I'm coming from a different culture. The way we are communicating in Germany is very different than the way we're communicating in Asia, for example. And I'm glad that Mr. Radhakrishnan is so open-minded, because otherwise you would have had a lot of miscommunication already. But you have to distinguish that. And I'm pretty sure that people in the north of India are acting or behaving slightly different from people in the south. People from the east are probably acting different from people from Maharashtra. And that's something we have to consider. You have to understand, how are people perceiving you? You have to understand, how are you approaching certain things, certain aspects of life and of coaching. And therefore, every coaching philosophy is independent from each other. Yeah, it's a very individual process of developing this philosophy. But experienced coaches, successful coaches, they are able to adjust their own coaching style towards the athlete. And this will become part of your philosophy as well. It's a huge difference if you're talking to female athletes and to male athletes, for example, just because the way they've been raised. It's different if you're talking to an athlete who is very good in mathematics, yeah, because you can describe angles, maybe lever arms, to introduce a technique. If you have an athlete who is very prone to art or music, talking about angles, specific joint angles during a long jump takeoff will probably just confuse him. So with this kind of athletes, you maybe have to focus more on rhythm. So you have to adjust your communication, you have to adjust your coaching style according to the athlete, and that becomes part of your philosophy as well. But to do so, you have to understand about your own personality. Yeah, and if you Google, for example, there's one website, it's called 16 Personalities. You can share, you can have a free personality test. It takes 15, 20 minutes. And I guarantee you that you will learn a lot about yourself and the way you are interacting and perceived by other people. And that's crucial. So you need to develop your own coaching philosophy, independent from any others. And what I shared is that this coaching philosophy will change over time. So regularly, once every 6 months or so, have a look, write it down, write the aspects of your coaching philosophy down. Once every 6 months, have a look into this philosophy and think, am I still following the same principles, or do I have to adjust or add certain aspects? Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Sir, next question is for Radha, sir. How athlete make himself? Please clear it in Hindi.
What is that? I did not understand.
Please, how athlete make himself? Please clear it in Hindi.
How?
Athlete make himself.
Athlete make himself. How does the athlete get independent? Independent, yeah. If you're using you don't understand anything.
Okay.
If you're talking,
you want to say that how you will make athlete independent?
Yes.
Or
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
वो जो अभी जो वॉल्कर ने बताया, जो एथलेट इंडिपेंडेंट, हमारा जो जिम्मेदारी है एथलेट को इंडिपेंडेंसी लाना है, क्योंकि हर चीजों में वो कोच का सपोर्ट या उसका पेरेंट्स का सपोर्ट या उसका फ्रेंड का सपोर्ट अगर लेगा, देन अगर जब तक उनका इंडिपेंडेंस नहीं आएगा, उसका खुद का ओनरशिप, जो मैं क्या करना है, मेरा क्या गोल है, मेरे को कैसे अचीव करना है, that is what you have to bring independency to the athlete to have a better coaching style. Is it clear? समझ में आ गया? और मेरा भी हिंदी इतना अच्छा नहीं है. I'm just managing it. But I want, Mr. Walker, with your permission, I want to add the answer for the escort system. ये जो escort system is a big problem in our country. As escort system is as a particular coaching style, the coach doesn't allow his athlete to go out from him. ये जो हमारा देश में अभी ऐसा है, काफी अपना अच्छा potentials, we are missing them because of this particular coaching style of some of the coaches. Though they are not competent, by the rewards and to get the popularity, they don't allow the athletes to go out from him. And at the age of 18, 19, you can find the athlete is nowhere. And the coach is restricting to enjoy the facilities which has been provided by Government of India by keeping him along with them. That is what escort system. Of course, he made it very short, but I want, because this is a big problem which we are facing in our country. There are many coaches doesn't allow the coaches to go, athletes to go out from them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot, sir. Sir, I will hand over the mic to Nagesh. Nagesh, do you have any other questions?
Yes, one question. Can you hear, sir?
Yes.
What can be done if we can affect early burnout, already burnout due to early specialization? We can come back them like.
Can you clarify again the question? The question is that if an early specialized burned out athlete is being received to a coach, what can we do?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and it's not that easy to answer. The problem, if an athlete is facing this early specialization, yeah, I've mentioned some of the reasons or the results yesterday already. Often they are burned out, they're dealing with a huge number of injuries, they're lacking in fundamentals. So the only chance you as a coach have is to rebuild this fundament. And you cannot expect this athlete to be successful within the next season. So if you, for example, if a new athlete is joining your training group and you know that he's coming from a coach who was forcing early specialization, you have to be extremely patient, because it might take 2-3 years for this athlete to regain his natural strength. You have to focus a lot again on the fundamentals. Often you have to reteach technical aspects, because early specialization in most cases is according to a very strong physical development, but not regarding the technical enhancement. So you have to focus a lot on techniques. You have to develop proper core strength, proper motor skills, and you need to be very patient, because it will take time. And it might even be that when the athlete is coming or joining your training group, that within the first year he will not do very well in competition. So you have to explain the situation to the athlete, to the parents, and you have to encourage the athlete to be patient as well, because it will take a long time to reteach him, to get used to a proper coaching style.
Thank you, sir. Sir, next question is, which would be the best age for scouting talents in athletics?
Yeah, yesterday I've introduced that it does not really make sense to scout talents before the age of 15 or 16, because it's very hard to estimate whether they will be eventually successful. So from an athletics perspective, like the age of 15, 16 would probably be the best. The only problem is that we cannot, two things, we cannot ensure that if he's scouting an athlete in the age of 15, that they have dealt with the necessary base. So we need to probably do it a bit earlier to ensure that these athletes have been taught the right fundamentals. Another difficulty we are observing, that athletics is always in competition with the other sports. And if cricket, for example, starts to scout athletes in the age of 10 or 11, and athletics only in the age of 15, that means that most of the talents will be involved with cricket at an earlier stage. And that's the reason why we have to do a kind of talent identification, or why we have to encourage kids to join athletics at a much younger age. Even though we know from a scientific perspective, it does not really make sense. But if we would only start at the talent identification at the age of 15, 16, it would be too late, because most of the talents would have been engaged in other sports already. And that's something we have to avoid, because from our perspective, of course, we want the most talented, the most gifted athletes to run, jump, and throw, and not to play cricket or to swim or to do gymnastics. I'm a bit selfish here.
Sir, one more last question, sir. In the early age, the athlete failed to perform. If he or she can start again at the age of 25, can possibly to get higher level performance.
Before that, answering the question, our president want to speak something. Sir, you can come, sir.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to add to something which Radha said, that, you know, what we have been noticing in the past and we are having a lot of trouble is when athletes want personal coaches like their husbands or fathers or mothers, or who are actually no coaches. We have no problem if the coach is a husband or whoever, if he's a good coach. For example, Anju Bobby George, her husband Bobby, as an outstanding coach, and he trained her. He took her to the US. He consulted the world record holder for her. But there are some coaches. There are some people who don't want to do anything but get their husbands or whoever, so that when the cash awards happen, they want those cash awards for the coaches. Now, this is destroying the athlete. For God's sakes, don't do this. This had become a fashion till AFI put its foot down some years ago and said, no, only the coaches who are in the camps will go. But we have to understand that we have to give the best, whatever is best available to our athletes. We are not interested in anything personal. So for God's sakes, don't do this. The other thing is, there are coaches who are completely incapable, from very old school. They have some of the best athletes, but they will not give them up to, or nor will they take expertise. When we brought a foreign coach, they had a physical hand-to-hand fight with the foreign coach. So those foreign coaches are here to help us. Please learn from them and then set up your own. But till such time there is a gap in scientific knowledge, till there is a gap in scientific knowledge, we have no option but to keep learning and give our athletes. This is completely selfish, that I will not let an athlete go somewhere else because it's my athlete. Nobody is anybody's athlete. Please understand. Secondly, you go to school, you go to high school. You go to school, you have a very good English teacher, you have a very good math teacher. Then you go to college. That teacher does not teach you what you learn in college. Then you do a postgrad. There is another professor who will do postgrad, but he may not even be good at teaching what your school teacher has taught you. But what he teaches you, the school teacher cannot teach you. So there is a progression in life. Your athlete has to move from school to college to Asian to world level. And there are people saying, maine banaya, maine, and there are athletes also who are so brainwashed. Nahi ji, ye to hamare ghar pe aaya tha, main 15 saal ka tha, I was 15 years old, he brought me from my house, now I cannot leave him. Everybody has certain limitations, including all of us. And if we don't care for our athletes, then we will continue this behavior. So please take help. And we have said that whoever has been the coach will remain the coach on record. Whoever has coached him later will also be on record. And everybody will get cash awards or whatever. So for selfish motives, and we have seen this time and again in AFI, and then we have put our foot down. So my request is, please think of the athlete first. For God's sakes, think of the athlete first. And I can give you numerous examples. So please, just to support what Radhakrishna has told you, this is actually what is happening. This is a fact. And I'm sure all of you who are sitting up there know what is happening. So please think of the athlete and things. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Adil is actually very right, because that's the situation we are observing, especially in our national camp. And in the end, we are all working together at the same goal. I think that's what we have to understand. Yeah, whether it's the coach, the youth coach in the age of 50, who's covering the age in the age of 15, 16, or the senior coach who's taking over when the athlete reaches the age of 20 or 21. We have to work together, and that's the only way to improve the Indian coaching ecosystem. Coming back to the question, if an athlete who's probably not successful at a young age can still become a successful world-class athlete, I think it depends a bit on the event. In the middle long distances, the race walk, I would say it's possible because you can develop a certain endurance ability. In the other events, it depends very much on the amount of so-called fast twitch muscle fibers. And these fast twitch muscle fibers are genetically inherited. So it's predetermined by birth already. And we have this saying that you can become a marathon runner, but you have to be born as a sprinter. So personally, I would say if your athlete in the age of 18, 19, despite a age-related, holistic, careful training, is not close to a national, international or Asian standard, the chances for this athlete to start a successful career are pretty low. It's not impossible, but it's relatively low. Still, it is very important that we develop the capacities, the abilities of our athletes. It makes no sense to push the athletes too early. Remember the chart from yesterday, that a lot of athletes who are doing particularly well in the age of 15, 16, eventually they're not able to improve their performance any longer. So the top athletes, they are successful despite a relatively low amount of training. A 100 or 400 meter sprinter who is highly talented, it's enough if he's training 5, 6 times a week, he will still be able to run 47 seconds. But if you have to train 10 sessions to run 47 seconds, you already know that the talent of these athletes is limited. So your responsibility as a coach is to apply the right things at the right time and to develop the athletes with as little effort as possible, because we have to leave this to the senior stage, yeah, when the athlete starts the specialization or the performance stage.
Thank you, sir.
Probably I've seen one interesting question I would like to answer personally from Mr. Amit Gopale, and he was asking, does the coaching style not depend on the athlete's mindset, personality, age, maturity? Because some athletes may improve with pressure or shouting. I think this is exactly the other way around. And I really encourage you to rethink your coaching style, because the mindset and the personality and the maturity level of the athlete depends on your coaching style. Yeah, if you're spending so much time with an athlete, again, you have a huge responsibility. And if you are diminishing the athlete's responsibility, you are also reducing the self-esteem. If you are shouting to a person, if you're shouting to one of your athletes, this athlete will most likely lack in confidence. And it might be possible that the athlete is winning a medal at tough games, but I can guarantee you that the chances for this athlete to succeed in an international competition are extremely reduced. We have to develop independent human beings. And I just want to think of yourself. Where do you have a higher motivation as a coach? If someone is encouraging you, saying, learn from your mistakes, take the lesson and go ahead, or if someone is shouting at you. And I hope that all of you agree that encouraging words are way more motivating than discouraging shouting. Yeah, so please rethink this. I know it's happened all around the country, but with a young generation, which has free access to a lot of information, which has the opportunity to express themselves on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever, we have to treat these athletes in a different way, because otherwise we will not be able to develop a trustworthy relationship. Okay, any other questions?
One question, sir.
Yeah?
Can we discuss training program with athletes?
Pardon? Would you mind repeating this?
Can we discuss training program with athletes?
Yeah, this is what the next weeks what we're doing during the next weeks. We actually chose this order of classes on purpose. Yeah, yesterday we wanted to have a brief introduction on athlete development to align everybody, that everybody is exactly aware, okay, this is the present situation in India. Yeah, and we mentioned 6 different reasons why India right now is not able to succeed on international stage. And it's not only in athletics, it's for other sports as well. So today was about coaching philosophy. And I want you to think about this philosophy, see it as a homework that until tomorrow that you're writing down what is your coaching philosophy looking like. And over the next sessions, we have 20 more sessions to come. We want you to carefully listen and after every session to contribute to your coaching philosophy. Tomorrow, Coach Galina Bukarina, our coach of the 400-meter team, she will introduce a few basic principles about coaching. And from next week onwards, we will discuss speed training. We will discuss, I think, nutrition for athletes, especially for young athletes. We will talk about hurdling. The week afterwards, we talk about strength training and about throws, followed by jumps. And then at the end, we will discuss a lot about how to construct a training session, how to construct a microcycle, and even an annual plan. Yeah, but before doing that, we want to equip you with the necessary knowledge. So it's really nice to see that you are all very interested in this specific aspect, but just be patient. And coaching always depends on a holistic picture. Yeah, you need to get a very, very deep knowledge regarding all aspects involved. And I guarantee you, if you're following the next 20 sessions for the next 5 weeks, you will definitely be wiser afterwards. And I really hope that you will be encouraged and confident enough to apply these things on the ground, because this will leave a huge impact. Yeah, we had almost 470 people joining today's classes, 480 I think we had yesterday. If 470 Indian coaches change their mindset, change their training, optimize it, imagine the impact you can have on this country. And I guarantee, or I fully agree with Mr. Radhakrishnan, who mentioned yesterday that in 2028, if all of us are working together, if everybody is contributing with a single part to the overall development, we're not talking about winning 1 or 2 medals at Olympic Games. We are talking about winning 8, 10, maybe 12 medals at the Olympic Games. But this really depends on how well you are able to apply this knowledge, how well you are able to develop the youth and junior athletes. Yeah, and again, within the next session, together we will work on that. And yeah, if there are no more questions, I think we can conclude today's session, Mr. Radhakrishnan.
Yeah, 1 minute, sir.
Sure.
Tomorrow we have the sessions at 10 a.m. As regular, Saturday, because it is for 5 weeks. I know that it is tiring for you, but definitely you will be getting some very good information to develop your coaching. And I thank our respected president to be with us for whole session, as well as the ED, senior ED. He was also there with us till the question and answer starts. And some of the national coaches like Mr. Dhillon, Mr. Basan Singh have been appeared today. Thanks to them, and as well Anju Bobby George and Bobby George also was there. Thanks to all, and please, all the SAI appointed coaches and sports NAS diploma trainees, stay back in the meeting, don't quit the meeting. Otherwise, thanks to all, others can leave the meeting if you like.
Yeah, have a good day and see you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
And regards to our friend from Bangladesh as well.
Yeah, Abdullah Kafi.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I could not mention his name. Abdullah Kafi. He's the national coach of Bangladesh.
Okay, have a good afternoon. Bye.